3, B as in. Okay, are we set?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene back into open session. And I'd like to start with item 3, B as in Baker, with the fire chief's statement to the public as to his status with the Sedona Fire District. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board, staff, and community. So I know this meeting's been convened because a short time, a couple of weeks ago, I tendered my retirement to the fire board and stated my intention that at the end of my contract here in September, on September 3rd, I'll retire from the fire service. So with that, I'd like to make a statement. And first of all, just a big thank you to this community, this fire board, our leadership, our administrative staff, and our firefighters. There's been nothing but incredible support for myself and for my command here the last several years, and I am very grateful for that and appreciative. I believe this is a great organization with excellent leadership, and because of that, I am confident that it will continue to move forward in a productive and positive way. It's been a pleasure working with each and every one of the staff. I think we have an unusual team here, and then in that the starters and the bench are solid. So I think converted our staff to NBA team, we probably wouldn't have a issue winning the championship. So I believe we've had some great accomplishments here over the last several years with staffing, training, apparatus equipment purchases, budget, with initiating plans in some significant strategic areas that give us stability and longevity to the operation of the district. So not only I believe the day-to-day operations have become more focused and solid and efficient and effective. Again, this team, this staff has identified some significant strategic areas that we really have some good planning going on. Our IT infrastructure is one of those. So I'm excited to see that work as it continues and as I keep in touch with staff. So I'm grateful and appreciative for the opportunities I've been given here to serve. I have spent over 30 years in the fire service. And really, if I condensed why I've been in the fire service for 30 years and what I've tried to accomplish, really, was just about serving others. Very simple. I spent 30 years of my life in this occupation serving others, and a large part of that I was in a leadership role. So it hasn't been easy, but it's been incredibly satisfying and rewarding. With that, I just want to share that I do have a pretty good personal transition plan. Part of that is spending time with family and friends. I'm sure some of it might involve a pour or two of Kentucky bourbon. Sure. But I am looking forward really just to spending some coming months really debriefing over that 30-year career and looking back and closing some doors and, just going through a checklist and really accepting what an incredible opportunity I've had. I've been blessed with really working for two outstanding agencies, two states, and the ability to stay here in the Southwest as a firefighter. I believe Southwest has some of the finest firefighters in the country, and we have some of the most intense complexity, especially when you interject wildland fire. So, man, I'm very humbled for the opportunities given me, including the last 3 years here, and I'm very appreciative. And thank you, Mr. Chair, Board, for the opportunity to make a statement.
Thank you, Chief. Well said, well stated. I'd like to open it up to the board and to make comments if they have any as to their interactions with you over these past 3 years. And I'd like to start with Helen, who's there in front of you.
So, Chief, thank you for your service. I appreciate the fact that you have been so helpful to me as a new board member in learning about the Sedona Fire District and the ins and outs of that, and I appreciate it. I realize how difficult sometimes a decision to make the transition that you're making can be, but I cheer you on, and may the time that's yet to come be even more rewarding. And once again, thank you for your service.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Helen. Al, would you like to say a word?
I'll say a quick word to John. I met John early on in my term of service as a four-year member of the governing board of the Sedona Fire District, and we were in a search function, and I met you in one of the initial interviews, and from the very first moment I met you, I knew we were on the right track, and we did. You were the final candidate and chosen, and I think Sedona made a really wise and good choice. And the last 3 years have proven it, with COVID being such a major disruptor in every aspect of community life, and then how to operate a fire district with all the types of emergencies that come up with COVID being in the air one way or the other was extremely complex, and you never went to school for that because you had to learn on the job. How do you do this? And you did it and took us through it, and the district shined. And I am extremely proud and pleased to have known you, and know that you're going to go on and have a wonderful second career, or maybe third career, in something that you find exciting and enjoyable. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Al. Gene, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Al, you said everything I wish I would have said. And Chief, you and I go back a few years with the same people that we work with within the fire service in the Southern California area. And I've come to know you and as a friend. I'm saddened that you're leaving, but we gained we gained a great fire chief when you arrived. I just want to tell you that I hope that you keep in contact. Friends are hard to come by, so I intend to stay connected with you. So as you go off into retirement, please keep in touch, my friend.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gene. I don't know if Janet made it back. Is she there? Okay, with that said, I'll make a final statement. Chief, on behalf of the entire board, I mean, you have been top notch since day one, and an old-time fireman, actually an old-time fire chief, told me that the fire district and a fire department is like a freight train, and you got to keep it rolling. Got to keep it rolling. But every now and then, you've got to have the wits about you when to pull the brakes and bring the train to a stop when something isn't right. And you had the courage and the determination and the know-how to do that, and then get the train start moving again in a forward position. And this train is moving. We don't have time to stop. And I credit a lot of things to you and your understanding and the learning curve you had to do when you first got here, especially from a large department to a smaller district. And that adjustment isn't always easy. It wasn't easy for me, but it's an adjustment you have to make. And you did it very well. You were determined, you were forthright, and you made the calls when it was difficult, when everybody seemed to be against you and wanted to do it their way. But we did it with the best interest of the district, people of our community, and our firefighters and admin staff. And to that, I say thank you. And lastly, like Gene said, and the others, you are my friend, and I am going to miss you, but I do plan on staying in contact with you. And maybe I'll be that other guy with that taste of bourbon, and maybe even a fly rod and a fly line, and we'll get Bill in there too. So thank you for a job well done, and happiness down the road. Thank you.
Sir, I really appreciate it.
Bill, would you like to say anything?
I won't repeat what John and I have shared privately, but I do want to publicly thank you. The district is better off for you having been here. My life a lot easier, highly professional.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that said, it leads us to the second item as we reconvene into public session, which is item 3A, which is discussion possible action, the fire chief status as a result of executive session. And basically, if it's appropriate at this time, Bill, I'd like to make a motion to accept the letter of retirement from Chief John Troutwine as of September 3rd, 2022. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion is passed. We accept your letter of retirement. We wish you luck, and we look forward to seeing you down the road. Thank you, John. Okay, as we move on to the next item, item 3C, discussion, possible action, and announcing the fire chief vacancy. The announcement of that vacancy will be as of September the 4th, which would be the day after his date of retirement. Is that a motion that needs to be made to accept into the record, Bill?
No, Mr. Chair, you've already asked for and entertained a motion to accept his retirement. You simply can announce the effective date of that, which you just did. You can move on to the action items on 3C.
Okay, thank you very much. The next items give us a brief description of how we're going to move forward. And we have several options to us. Chief Troutwine is going to be with us for another month and a half, so he's going to be involved with this process. And there's been one item in the job description that has been a stumbling block for all who apply. And that is the item of residency. Residency has been in place for a long time. It had its moments, and it allowed that fire chief to live within the district and to work with the community as it related to those taxes that we incurred for the fire district. Well, the fact of the matter is the chief merely suggests what the mill rate's going to be, and it's a fire board that actually approves that rate and that budget. And all of us on the fire board live within the district. Secondly, the fire chief, as I see it as we move forward here, isn't normally the first person to respond. They do respond, and they need to respond in a timely manner. But oftentimes when they do respond, they have the choice of either accepting command or not accepting command and leaving those in charge in charge. The housing market in this town is as low as it possibly can be, with the prices higher than most any other community around. For those reasons, I think we've come to a moment in time where it's my opinion, and I need to get feedback from the rest of the board, that the residency requirement be modified. And I looked at a geographic region. I looked at a time parameter where they need to be here within a certain time. And I looked at living within a specific circumference or radius, I should say, radius of headquarters, Fire Station 1. I'd like to open it up to the board and get their input as to the residency requirement. Helen, if you would, please.
Mr. Chair, I completely agree with you. I think it's asking a great deal in the market, as you highlight, that for us to try and recruit a chief or promote a chief and expect them to live within Sedona. I do think that there are some benchmarks, for example, the police chief's job description and other job descriptions that give us some guidance as a way to handle this. So I fully support the adjustment of this requirement in the job description.
Okay, thank you. Al.
I'm in concurrence with Helen. I live in the city of Sedona, but I live in the Verde Valley. I live in northern Arizona. I mean, I see that they're just layers of a community that gets broader depending upon your perspective. I have a lot of friends that work here in Sedona, but matter of fact, even people that work for the city and live in other areas around Sedona City, maybe the Village or Cottonwood or matter of fact, Clarkdale's become a real popular place for people to live. So I think opening it up to a broader perspective so that the drive time is not unreasonable to be here for an emergency would be perhaps a smart thing to do. So I'm in support of thinking through this residency to be more flexible, to give you the best opportunity to recruit best candidates.
Okay, thank you. Jane, if you will, please.
Well, I concur for sure. I've given some thought to this since the chief announced his retirement. It's important that we get the best possible people as candidates, and to bring candidates into an area and demand that they live in an area that has a lack of housing, and the expense of the housing around here is for me not acceptable. When if we expand the radius or residential radius out just a little bit, it accommodates potential candidates. With that, I highly recommend that we alter the residency requirements.
Okay, thank you, Jane. And you already got my views, and I rather than actually making a decision right now as to which one, because there may be others. We have our regular board meeting on July the 18th, which is essentially 2 weeks away. I'd like to ask the chief if he can create that agendized item of residency requirement and the pros and cons of either a region, a mile marker, or a time marker, or anything else that may come into mind, so that the board can then move on that at that time. Does that seem feasible to you, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and to the board, does that seem feasible?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so July 18th, we'll discuss that. That will be an agendized item, and we may meet during the course of that time between now and then to fine tune it, Chief. But I'd rather make that decision after we get a chance to think about it and address it in its proper format.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just for the record, I believe the next board meeting is July 19th.
Oh, 19th. Okay, I thought it was the 18th. My bad. Okay. The next item on the agenda does have to do with the internal candidate promotion or appointment process, followed by acting interim fire chief selection process, and then to be followed by external hiring process. So I believe with the or adjustment of the residency requirement. Do you know, Chief, if it opens it up to internal candidates?
I would say yes. Yeah, I believe it does.
Okay, so that'll give us some time to give us some time to think about that, and perhaps those members who may wish to throw their hat in the ring to be considered for appointment internally, and you know, we can move on that. With that said, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just have one comment or concern here. I notice on the agenda that we don't talk about the job description until we get down to the external appointment process. It seems to me that if we're going to adjust the job description, that will be important to the internal candidates too. So I'm wondering if it's possible that the agenda item that gets on the next board meeting agenda is not just the residency requirement, but in fact is the job description and the approval of that, which then allows internal candidates to know what the job description is.
Correct. I got you. Anybody else have any comment on that?
Yes, Gene here. We've spent considerable amount of time and effort and money and what have you, establishing identifying the chief's role. And so I think that we've done much of that in the past and have you. So we may want to revisit that, but nevertheless, I think we've done that homework previously.
Al, any comment?
I'm not.
I understand Helen's point, and she's trying to create a clear lane of for any internal candidate to step forward, knowing what they're stepping forward to, by describing the job description, especially if there's going to be any amendments to the job description that would affect someone's interest. And also, it's a process we have to go through anyway if you were going to use an outside firm.
Right. Helen, did you have an additional comment?
I just wanted to respond to Gene's comment. I'm not suggesting wholesale changes to it. I'm simply suggesting that if we're going to make an adjustment to one piece, that we should address the job description in that conversation. That's all I'm suggesting.
Right, and that's a reasonable suggestion. I will let the board know that the job description and job announcement, as they're described here on this agenda, was updated as of 3 years ago when we hired Chief Troutwine. So it is probably as recent a document as we have for the position, and with the change that the changes we proposed for residency would be the change in that. And so as part of the package for the July 19th meeting, we should have those job descriptions and job announcements so that anybody internally can read what they are and move forward from there. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Gene here. Yes, I'm actually looking at the job description as we put forward in hiring a fire chief. So I'm sure we'll come back to that and revisit it.
Right. So it was difficult in trying to assemble this agenda because there were a lot of what ifs, and with a regular board meeting happening just around the corner on the 19th, I was hoping to get that fundamental information from the board to be input into a more finalized packet for our next board meeting. So when you look at item C as in Charles 2, we start looking at, if we appoint someone from within or promote someone within, if we only have one person, that's an easy do. If we have multiple people filing for it, that becomes a little bit more complex. And so that's why I'd like the chief to ensure that when he goes back between now and the 19th, that we've identified internal candidates and they have an opportunity to apply and perhaps an opportunity to test. And I'd go so far as an opportunity to act as the interim fire chief for a period of time that will allow both of them to act as fire chief for a given period of time. And I'll just use that as an example, say 3 months each, and allow the board members to interact with them within that capacity. So these are some of the components of where we're going with this thing. I do not see a permanent new fire chief on September the 4th, unless there's only one candidate. And if there is, do we want to open that up to a nationwide search to include that one candidate? So you see how it's kind of a little more complex than just voting on and making motions on things today.
Well, this is Gene, if I may. As many of you know, I spent 36 years in the fire service in a very large department. And people enter as firefighters at the very lowest level. Some of them have plans to promote, and as they do, they acquire more and more expertise and skills, and they are seeking a higher office, if you will. And when we go outside to seek a fire chief, what have you, and not look diligently at the people that we have, it's a great disappointment for those who've spent an entire career preparing themselves for position that may go to someone else from some other state.
Okay, good point. Thank you, Gene. Anybody else have comment?
Here, this is Bill.
Yeah, Bill.
Gene, you're a little hard to hear. If you could get closer to the mic, appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I can't get much closer, Bill. I'm sorry, I'm right up against the computer.
I think in paraphrasing what Gene said, that it's important that we get the information out to those that are internal who may have been, studying and had aspirations of being a chief someday, and give them an opportunity rather than go outside externally and potentially bypassing them when they could have very well been a good fit for our fire district. So with that said, was there any other question on item C 1 through 3? And Chief, is there any question as to what direction the board has given to you for our next meeting as it relates to the fire chief vacancy?
Well, so I'll reiterate what I understand. One is the board would like a recommendation on a residency requirement, which staff will put together. Second item I noted was that we include the current job description and job analysis for evaluation by the fire board. And the third item I had was, before the next board meeting, identify any potential internal candidates that have expressed interest. Is that correct?
That is correct. Does the board have any other additions to that?
No.
Okay, and then with that said, Chief, to ensure that, and you may have mentioned at the fire chief job description and announcement / analysis, be updated and brought as part of the packet.
Well, my recommendation is the meeting 19th. My recommendation would not be to rush through the job description or job announcement. We have time. I think the board getting exposed to that and reviewing it, and I think then maybe giving direction on a timeline if it looks like we need to do gross improvements. That's been 3 years. I think at a minimum, a 3-year evaluation of a job description is appropriate. So without reviewing it right now in front of me and without being able to determine what kind of work we would need to do if we did have to update it substantially, I would say we evaluate it, and then the board can look at that. And even if there's a I just don't want a compressed timeline for that component. It's an important component. I think saying July 19th, I'm not going to rush through it. If I look at it and go, it needs some work, that's going to be my recommendation. So if that makes sense, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and it does. Any board members have any comment?
No.
I do.
Yes.
I'm wondering if, in preparation for the board meeting, because while I agree with you, we don't want to rush, but on the other hand, I want to keep the process moving, because I want us to be able to have someone step into your shoes, even interim or otherwise. Is it possible that the job description as it currently stands could be circulated to the board so that we can review it well in advance of the meeting and be prepared with comments?
Yes.
So if we can, if staff can email a copy of that to us, then we would have that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Item number 3, Roman numeral 3, number 4, possible use of an outside search and testing company. If we have an internal promotion, I don't know if we would need an external search and testing company, but if it does go to a nationwide search, I'd like to make sure that we are as transparent as possible and ensure that we've done RFPs from at least whatever the industry standard is. If it's 3, then we need 3 companies so that we can make an intelligent decision based on the cost and performance of what that company states they may do. Any input? Okay. The last item on the agenda is item 3D, as in David. Discussion, possible action, vacancy timeline for the fill. Chief, I'd like to open it up with you and what your thoughts are on how you see a position like this filling in, hiring, interim, or nationwide search.
I think when we inquire of our chiefs if there's any interested internal candidate, I would say if we have 2 or more internal candidates, I would recommend a testing process for those 2 internal candidates. I think one thing to consider, the board consider when we talk about doing a national search is what's the level of your organization? And I think this organization does have quite a bit of national exposure, and it's pretty prolific. That's one thing to consider. Although, again, I think the first step is let's find out if there's any interested internal candidates that are viable. I think, again, 2 or more, I would recommend a process to vet those and see if one would surface to the top. And then if we had multiple internal candidates that the board didn't feel were ready, then we could initiate another process that would probably be a wider, broader net.
Okay. And Bill, if I can ask you the legality of hiring within and not going to a national search for this rank, fire chief, are we overlooking anything, or are we well within our right to hire from within?
The law permits you to do either as you wish.
Okay.
If Mr. Chair, if I can make one more comment too, with this issue. Right now, we have very strong leadership, and we have very strong forward motion in our district. The board's fully aware of some of the infrastructure needs that we have, fire station, some of the other strategic areas that we've highlighted over the last couple of years as we move forward. Another thing to highlight with strong internal candidates is, as you mentioned earlier, you know, it's like a big freight train. Freight trains that are moving at a high speed do not stop very quickly, and that's a process. But also, if they're moving at a high speed, sometimes it's prudent just to jump on board and keep going at that high speed. And I think we're moving pretty fast. We're at a high speed. You know, having that continuity and forward motion continue, I think that's another thing that we should consider.
Okay. I think as we prepare our agenda for the July 19th meeting, we'll ensure that point is agendized so that we can discuss that. So with that said, timeline for Phil, I don't know that I see a person in the position on a permanent person in that position on September 4th. Especially if we have multiple people within our organization that file for that test. So with that said, would it be feasible to say that we would look at perhaps a 6-month window of an interim chief between the two candidates, or would we look at a 4-month? You know, how do we classify that?
Mr. Chair, I feel like we're a little ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
If at the next meeting, at the July 19th meeting, we have an idea of, we have a job description, we do the review of that, and in the meantime, the chief lets us know if there's some potential internal candidates, I think we'll be at that point in a much better position to lay out a timeline that's reasonable and realistic. I think right now we're sort of trying to fit all possibilities, and maybe just waiting that 2 weeks will give us more information to do a really realistic timeline.
Okay, I would agree with that. Al, any comment on that?
I agree with Helen, and Helen has a strong administration background, so I really appreciate her insight. You don't want to bog this down just for the sake of protocol, when in fact the solution may be right at hand, and it might be possible to actually have a new chief effective September 4th. And again, it might not be, and I would rather continue on this path and see if we can't come up with a timeline that everybody's in agreement that's also prudent. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Gene, are you still out there? Do you have a comment?
Yes, I'm here. It seems to me that when a fire chief goes off to lecture at the fire academy or is involved in one thing or another, there's a rotation, whether you want to call it interim or not, but someone moves forward and what have you, and is an acting head of the department in the absence of the fire chief. I don't think we need to wait 6 months. I think that we kind of know how that system works. And as we move forward, I don't believe it will take that long, at least to bring somebody in on an interim basis until such time as the testing procedure is completed.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to close on this point simply by saying there are a lot of moving parts involved. And it was my job, I felt, to bring a lot of these facets to the attention of not only my fellow board members, but also to the public who may be watching this, that we don't rush into these things. We look at every step along the way to ensure that we get the very possible best candidate for the position. And we are, as the chief stated, in an outstanding position to select from within. The difficult part is if there's more than one. So I would gladly take on that challenge to ensure that we still get the best one for the position. So unless there is anything else to be said or comment on that, Chief, did you have any closing comment on that?
I think we're seated very well for leadership. I don't anticipate any wobble whatsoever. So as board member McCarthy stated, we do have a process when the chief's out of town and we act up and cover it and without a glitch. So I think we're seated well. I think the next meeting, as board member McNeil stated, we'll have some information for the board. And I think some of this can be decided more clearly.
Okay, very good.
And
Al?
Dave, just so you know, Janet is here. She just walked in. So
Okay.
You might give her a quick summary and get some input from her since.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find that in the medical board I tried.
Okay, Janet, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, then just to review what we've discussed here, we have accepted the chief's letter of retirement as of September the 3rd. We have announced a chief vacancy as of September the 4th. We have reviewed the potential internal candidate promotional appointment process, if you will, but we just kind of brought it up as we have to either create the process or review the process so that we're all on board with it, versus acting interim fire chief selections or the external hiring process. We also looked at the ability to review the job description, the job analysis, and perhaps even the job announcement prior to our next meeting, so we have that knowledge on board going into the meeting. We discussed the ability of, if eventually we go into an external fire chief search, the potential of maximum transparency and making sure we have the right amount of companies that have had an opportunity to submit a, what is it, a RPF, or request for quote? Okay. Yeah, and then lastly, we kind of looked at a timeline of when a chief may be in place, but at this point in time, we would probably have a better idea by our next meeting, which is July 19th. I think that pretty much covers it up, that everything we're going to be talking about.
Thank you.
Okay. If there isn't any other comment, with that said, this meeting is now adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot.